let's start. Thank you, everybody. Good morning to all. First of all, a great and personal thanks to Professor Donaldson for being today here with us. It's a great honor, sincerely honor to have you here. I'm so sorry in advance, as I told you before, but today is an unusual day because we work every day, but today in a particular way, so I have to run to the Ministry of Economy and Finance. So as I told you before, to speak with the Minister about sustainability, because we are planning, and now I will tell you something, I will tell them something that I consider very strategic for the future of our role. I mean, when I say our, of course, I consider the role of the accountants in the sustainability field. And we are planning with the Ministry of Economy and Finance a path to reach different goals together on the sustainability field. But let me express my personal joy to have you here for two reasons. First of all, because your presence is the concrete demonstration of how important it is for us, not only for the CNDCEC, our institute, but also for the GBS. And I thanks personally also my dear friend, Andrea Venturelli. I always say Francesco because Francesco is the father of Andrea Venturelli, that has been my dominus in my university activity. So there's a particular deformation. When I see you, I see your father. You are very similar to your father. You are the best representation of your father, of course. But by the way, this is a concrete demonstration of what I consider strategic for our profession. Which is the strategic aspect of this situation? The merge, the fusion, the cooperation between academic and professional activities on the sustainability fields. In Italy, we are following two different lines of action on sustainability. On one side, the CNDCEC, that is a public entity and also is a professional body, is working in touch and in strict cooperation with all the governmental agencies, not only with the Ministry of Economy and Finance, with the Ministry of Agriculture, with the Ministry of Economy and something like this, because sustainability is something that interests all the aspects of the social and economical activity of our country, but in general I think it's the same all over the world. So we are speaking with all the governmental agencies, and we are having in these agencies a role of leading actor, not just a spectator, around the technical table, because we are fully aware, and personally I'm firmly convinced that it's important for us to write the role, to be a part. Scusate, chiudete il microfono per piacere. Scusa, si può chiudere il microfono tutti quanti? Okay, to be an active part of in the writing of the regulations, because in terms of course, of our technical activity as a professional of the assessment, of the assurance, of the reporting, all the aspects of sustainability. Secondly, I'm firmly convinced that sustainability is not a specialized field. You say, why you are telling me that? Because it's not something for, as I told during our first meeting, we have dedicated a national meeting, a national conference on sustainability in October 2022, and to demonstrate how important it is for us this field. And during this meeting, I told them that I consider sustainability not something just for passionate of climate change, but something that is, let me say, in the air. It flows in the different aspects of our economical system. And this is why we consider this, of course, sustainability strategy for our country, more than in the past. If you consider that in the last 2 days, we had pandemic event, we have a risk of a World War III, because due to the conflict between Ukraine and Russia, and we have an inflation situation in Europe. Now the inflation in Europe is about 8.2, 8.3%, very high. So there's a great difficulty for our firms, for our entrepreneurs to manage the activity. And it's important how to spend your money. It's important how to allocate your resources. It's important how to manage the activity inside your firm. So it's for us is a very important strategic question to follow to to study and to manage. And the third, and I conclude, aspects of our activity in the CNDCEC is that we want to manage and not to suffer this cultural transformation. Sustainability is not just a transfer of skills, but it's a cultural transformation. It's a cultural approach to in a different way inside the firms, inside the economy. So thank you again. Thank you, Andrea, for this meeting, but because it's not a conference, it's a technical meeting. It's a very important technical meeting. I'm really so sorry. Believe me, it's not formal to go away now, right now, because I have to go to the ministry, as I told you before. But I hope to meet you again. Perhaps we can organize, in that case, not a technical meeting, but a wide conference for our colleagues, also here in Rome, if you want, or in Bari, wherever you want. And there is our complete availability to organize this kind of events, because I consider this very important. Thank you very much, Professor Donaldson, and enjoy your stay. I don't know where you will come back in at home, but enjoy your stay here in Italy in this wonderful weather of Rome. We have summer now. We are not in spring. Thank you, everybody. Of course, thank you very much.
Okay. So thank you so much, Elbano. Thank you for the description of the context for this challenging world. Thanks to everybody for this meeting and for this participation. So I would like to spend a few words just to introduce the reason of this meeting, and I'd like to take the opportunity to say a big thank you to Professor Elbano De Nuccio for hosting this interesting seminar at this prestigious boardroom in National Headquarters of National Accountant Council. So, and allow me to also thank Prof.ssa Ericka Costa for giving the opportunity to enjoy this stimulating speech and feedback session with Professor Thomas Donaldson. Let me take a moment to list just few of Professor Donaldson's career contribution. Yeah, I try to capture some words of your speech in Trento, just to describe. As you know, he's an expert in business ethics and leadership, has published articles appearing in multiple prestigious scientific journals such as Management, Harvard Business Review and Academy of Management Review. He's a founding member of the Society of Business Ethics, and he worked as a consultant for many big corporations such as Microsoft, Motorola, I remember Walt Disney, United Nations, and in the financial sector for Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. I remember. So in any case, I ask that Ericka adds anything, if I may have forgotten something, some reference. So okay, yeah, I would say something about the importance role of economia aziendale, for this session, because some people translate economia aziendale in business administration, but I say that is not the right translation for economia aziendale, because one of the main contribution in economia aziendale, like science, is to describe the firm, the corporation, or a company as a system of three elements: resources, organization, and first of all, people. And I think that for this debate is very important start from this kind of contribution, because today we're talking about the role of values and intrinsic values in the process of value creations. And I think that it's necessary to focus our attention for the company and for the consultant in about the role of the people and the role of the values in terms of integrity, in terms of clarity, in terms of truth, in terms of a lot of values. So I don't want, I would like to say a lot of things about this debate, but so now allow me to go to give the floor to Professor Donaldson to shed light on this challenging debate. And please remember to pay close attention and take notes, formulate some questions for the second portion of the presentation. So enjoy the presentation. The floor is yours.
It is a.
Yeah, right.
Got that on?
Just the bottom. Yeah,
Is that right? Okay. It is a great pleasure to be here. As I was explaining earlier, I had no choice because Ericka Costa is a force of nature that cannot be resisted. I have discovered that. And I want to begin what will be a fairly academic presentation by sharing some prejudices of my own that I think pertain to the enterprise that many of you are about, of bringing more specificity and greater reach to an Italian perspective. My prejudices. I'm American. I like America. It's a great country. And it enjoyed, in the wake of World War II, unprecedented opportunity to shape institutions and have an impact on the remainder of the world. It's important to understand that history does not remain static. It moves forward. The times are different. My own prejudice is that many of the rules that are written in Washington and New York need to be adjusted in the face of the cultural realities around the world. I think this is true in academics. My poor colleagues who are Germans and Italians are pushed to publish in American journals. That's a shame in a way, because often what is relevant about Europe or Italy is not what a reviewer for an American journal takes seriously. Our conceptions of what a corporation is, corporate governance, have been largely written by American academics. There are some exceptions, of course, and Europeans over history have contributed far more than America to the wealth of ideas that you and I enjoy. Corporate governance, even in the OECD guidelines, basically written by New York lawyers. And in a way that is fairly lockstep, very inflexible to different kinds of contextual variables. I recall I've consulted I know nothing about accounting, but I have ended up consulting to accounting firms on a few occasions. I helped KPMG write their code of ethics, their global code of ethics. And one of the challenges we had was with so much variety, not only in the laws that accountants must face, but also in the cultural dimension. How were we to write a code that applied to everybody? We crammed it through, and I think to some extent at great disservice to some of the individual areas of accounting around the world. I've worked with E&Y, especially in their relationships with board members. I have consulted to KPMG's board of directors in the wake of a couple of scandals that they've had. You probably recall the tax scandal that occurred a while back, where they were creating tax shelters. This resulted in a huge corporate governance change in KPMG, which I helped. At any rate, it's time, I think, to think differently about some of these issues. And with that in mind, let me talk about two of the issues that I think hegemony has found its way to with particularly pernicious impact. One is the concept of value creation in business, and the other is the concept of corporate governance. So my talk today is titled Values and Sustainability, and Ericka asked me if I would basically give the ideas that I wrote in a piece that was published in 2022 by Organization Theory. And I will do that, and I understand a number of you have had an opportunity at least to read part of that, and I'm open to questions. But I also want to take this just a little farther, because that was actually the second of 5 articles that I've now written. And in the 3 that occurred after the one that I'm going to focus on, there's some other ideas that I want to share with you. So let's now get down to the academic business. Value creation is a ubiquitous concept, but here's an interesting question. If value creation doesn't have anything to do with values, it seems just to be a clever euphemism, a way of politely disguising the fact that what we're really talking about is financial optimization. Do we pay tribute to this concept of value creation and end up destroying a lot of value in our very act of creating and implementing it? Perhaps I don't have to tell you, but in the business literature, value creation is the golden label that we like to apply to everything. We're going to create value. But most models of value creation and business academics have to do with an exchange relationship between the firm and the customer, where almost all value is denominated in terms of economic value to the firm. That's it. And beyond that, while this term is used all the time, nobody really knows how to define it. I mean, if you read through the literature, you find that it's used in an astounding variety of ways. All strategic and many tactical decisions begin with a value proposition of some kind. This is often talked about as making the business case. And what I want to do is turn the ordinary way that the dominant mindset in business education and business research tends to take today, and I want to tip it up on its head. I want to turn it upside down. And I want to talk not about finding out the contours and details of the world, but about the process of changing the world, or the process of doing things. So instead of knowing, I want to focus on doing. And that is the realm of what has been called practical reasoning. Now, there's been a fair amount of work, not only by philosophers, but in business management literature. Here's some of it that led the way to this framework. I'm certainly not the only person who has talked about it. And one way of conceiving it is by way of thinking of business research as having sort of 2 doors. The first door being what predominantly is factor analytic approaches. So, I mean, my colleagues in accounting at Wharton, where I teach, this is the name of the game, and often with very sophisticated mathematical statistical analysis. And that's all good. And in the end, what do they end up with? Well, if they're lucky, it's this affects this and this affects that, and then we hope we can go ahead and use that for something. recently, I say recently, in the last couple of decades, there's been more attention to other methods, often not so mathematical, that have to do with different methods of research, historical chains of genesis and evolution, interviews that end up contouring a picture, a new picture of a business situation or challenge that we didn't have before. And these are, it's very important that these new methods have arisen. Just quickly, the factor analytic approach, which predominates, especially the American model, looking at, excuse me, variance, experimental studies, including behavioral ethics. And I have here a picture of Max Bazerman and Dan Kahneman, the two people you may know about. And behavioral economics for Kahneman, right? And behavioral ethics really for Bazerman. These have been very helpful. We find out how irrational we are in certain situations. We find out that in ethics, for example, I tend to overestimate my ethics and devalue yours. And these are predictable failures of ethical rationality. That's good to know, but it only gets us so far. It doesn't tell us what to do. It tells us what to look out for. And what I will be talking about is what might be called a third door, the door of value creation. And already there's a lot of back and forth. I don't know how many of you have tried to publish in, and this is not just true of American journals anymore. It's now pretty much true for European journals. So you get a good qualitative study, and it goes to the reviewers. And what do the reviewers say? Oh, gee, it'd be great if we could make this more robust by, going back. And basically, they're asking you to go back and do the factor analytic stuff, which seems to be the only currency that is completely accepted. I mean, that's changing a little bit, but it's still true. What I want to suggest we need is not only that, but also this, the two kinds of research that are represented at the bottom intersecting with value creation and practical activity, practical reasoning. And how do we do that? I mean, that's obviously a challenge. So I want to, in effect, redefine value creation as something that entails intrinsic values. What is an intrinsic value? Well, I go into some detail in the article. I don't mean, by the way, in the business academic literature, there's a distinction between internal motivation versus external motivation. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a very kind of precise definition that defines an intrinsic value as the last step in a chain of justification for an action. So ask yourself, why did you come here today? Oh, well, I came because Ericka told me I had to. Okay, well, that's all right. Or maybe I came because I thought I'd learned something from Professor Donaldson. Okay, so what? There can be a follow-up question. Well, suppose you learned something from Professor Donaldson. What are you going to do with it? Well, I don't know. Maybe I can take it back to my firm and give it some kind of application or write an article that would use some. So what? Suppose you do that. What's going to happen? And I don't know where your chain of reasoning goes. Maybe it goes to, well, give me an opportunity to have a little better position, make a little more money. That's great. That's good. So what? Well, it'll allow me to help my family. End of story. Because by the time you said family, you've hit an intrinsic value. You've hit something that counts as a full stop explainer for all of that activity that occurred before. And what I want to do is apply this to the way we think about corporations. What's the full stop explainer for corporate activity? And even the people who tend to defend what's called the shareholder primacy view don't really think it's just all about shareholders. It's going to have something to do with the way business makes the world better or helps us or something like that. But we haven't been able to, the environment, we haven't been able to fit that in to the mechanics of our theoretical reasoning in business. Intrinsic values, and this is Cass Sunstein, probably written more articles in law reviews than anyone. He's an amazing guy, but he gives a pretty simple definition. We value some things purely or principally for use. Consider hammers, forks, or money. All these things are great, hammers, forks, and money. But we value other things, at least in part, for their own sake. Knowledge, friendship, family, environment, human dignity, peace. We can contrast intrinsic and non-intrinsic values. And we don't have to go into too much detail. You have the article, but basically intrinsic values can be defined as non-derivative. They don't get their justificatory power by being derived from some other value somewhere. And that's in contrast to, so here are some more examples of that kind of thing. Economic welfare is one. Right to physical security, sustainability. And they defy what I like to call epistemological gravity. They are incommensurable. This is a kind of formal term. And they are incommensurable in a very hard sense. There's not a common denominator that you can use to put them all on the same scale. Right? That's what incommensurable means. And that makes them especially challenging and makes it not so easy to run some of the elegant, extremely almost Byzantine kinds of manipulations that we like to publish in journals. So the worth of a non-intrinsic value is derived ultimately from one or more intrinsic value. I was at a God knows why I was invited, because I'm not a strategic theorist, but I was invited to a fairly small gathering of some of the world's leading strategic theorists. And we had the luxury of being able to sit around and talk about this stuff. So I had a colleague turned to the group at one point. It was sort of our term came around, and we looked at the group and we said, okay, here's a puzzle. Law is to justice as medicine is to health, as business is to
What?
what? Dead silence. All these crackerjack, whip smart, strategic theorists had nothing to say, at least in the beginning. And then after about a minute, the room explodes. Everybody's saying, oh, it's prosperity. But what was interesting was the answers were not the same at all around the room, and nobody was quite sure what to say.
Maybe somebody says well-being. I think so. Or no?
Well-being. That may have been one. But are we in a poverty-stricken situation academically when we can't answer that question? Now, at any rate, so examples of non-intrinsic values include things, and we write lots of articles to get at this stuff. Transaction cost reduction, higher market share, cycle time reduction, lower employee turnover. These are good things, but they aren't justified in themselves. They're not intrinsic values. They're values, but they depend on other kinds of things. And I don't want to get too deep into the woods, but for those of you who like to think about economic theory and so on, the real problem lies in neoclassical economic theory and its emphasis on the preference. So even in revealed preference theory in economics, You have people preferring this to that. You can have preference rankings. You can have optimizing of preference satisfaction, et cetera, et cetera. This comes, all the way rational choice theory back to Bernoulli and then more recently von Neumann and Morgenstern. So if an individual prefers A to B, then she values A more than B. But notice, my preference may be, to dominate as many people as I can. There's nothing in a preference that has anything to do with morality. And this is probably my favorite quote in the whole world. It's from a philosopher, Canadian philosopher, actually. And it goes, in instances, this Charles Taylor is the guy's name. In instances where we are moved by a higher good, we assume that we are moved to value it because of what is good in it, rather than it's being valuable because of our reaction to it. I mean, that quote deserves all of our reflection. And it cuts the Gordian knot here. And it cuts out a lot of some of the thinking that I think has led us in the wrong direction. So, and here are just a couple of problems. And here is Mr. Pareto and Pareto optimality. But notice, as powerful as this notion is, and it's a wonderful notion. It does a lot of great things. I like Pareto optimality. Pareto optimal states can be truly awful. You take one person, have them own an island and everything on it, and put another 99 people on the island, you got a Pareto optimal state, which is essentially a slave state. And Amartya Sen, who won the Nobel Prize, of course, in economics a while back, is kind of well known for pointing out that some just basic things like commitment, promise keeping, I mean, it can't really be explained on the basis of a preference-oriented notion of that kind. So that is enough. That should give us enough angst, so it makes sense to kind of think about the practical syllogism. And here we're going to travel all the way back to Aristotle and Kant, and I mean, a lot of people have talked about this. And again, not only philosophers, but others. And here's just a list. In my article, I think the total references are, but most of the references on the top are to business literature. These are business academics who are now starting to talk about practical reasoning. And for our purposes, we can take practical reasoning and just think of it simply. You've got a focal value, something you're aimed at, whether you're a corporation or a person. You've got facts that you need to enter into that decision. And then you generate, as a conclusion, justified action. There's something called the practical syllogism. This hails from Aristotle, and this is a kind of quick and dirty version just to give you a sense of what's being talked about. The first premise is the value premise. Firms ought to avoid discrimination. Second premise is the facts are relevant. And of course, this is way too simple, but creating diverse hiring pools is an efficient means for firm A to avoid discrimination. The conclusion, and here's the bunger. The conclusion is not a proposition. It's an action. Whoa. Reasoning that issues not in a proposition, but an action, literally an action, doing something. Just backtrack very quickly. Jim Walsh, some of you may know Jim Walsh from some of his work, but he and I wrote a piece a while back where we tried to answer that question that the strategic theorists were having difficulty with. And we think that what business should be about is optimizing intrinsic values in the very special way that businesses can do it. It's not as if businesses can be all things to all people. They use the three major avenues of economic activity: distribution, production, exchange. And they're very good at creating economic wealth. And that's primarily why they're around. But we have them to serve a higher purpose, which is the satisfaction of the broader collection of intrinsic values. And we got pretty fancy in that article if you want to go back and look at it. So here's a kind of setup, and this kind of slick, I think, because it shows that you've got a two-way arrow here. You have an actor, maybe it's a corporation, maybe it's you, maybe it's someone, and it's hard to read up there, but at the top you have intrinsic values. And then there's a focal value. Maybe it's I want to help my child get better grades. I mean, just make it up. And then there's a set of facts that you have to use, and then the action, whatever that is, ensues. And that's value creation. If it's a firm doing it, it's value creation, economic firm. And the other arrow goes up. So it's a bi-directional arrow, the justification. Why did you do that? Let's make it a little more obvious with a, let's see. So if we think of, I have put, by the way, I've put a puzzle piece up here, a set of puzzles, and notice all these pieces fit together to indicate that this is not a mathematical optimizing. It can't be because of the incommensurability of intrinsic values. But some puzzle pieces fit together and some do not. And I'll say more about that in just a moment. So we next need the idea of a really good piece of practical reasoning. It's called phronesis in the Greek, but we'll call it ideal practical inference. And if I'm trying to serve intrinsic values, I need to recognize that intrinsic values are synoptic. That is, their value, their valence at a given point in time is going to depend on their position in the fact context and with respect to other values. So, simple example, we have two intrinsic values, right to free speech and the right to physical security. In a crowded theater, if I yell fire, I'm exercising my right to free speech, but my right to free speech has to be in that puzzle piece fitted into the right of people in the theater to physical security. And that's why we don't yell fire in a crowded theater. And it doesn't really mean that our right to free speech has been abridged. It's the way the fit happens. So the ideal act, whether it's a corporation or a person, is in all things considered best act. Perfectly wise action, it's sometimes called phronesis in the Greek Aristotelian context. But it's an ideal. I mean, it's impossible. Nobody can act perfectly. Nobody can know precisely the right thing to do in any instance. It's an ideal. But notice, ideals play very important roles in theories. Frictionless planes in physics, perfectly free markets in economics. Those are impossible to realize, and yet they play a very important role in the underlying structure of the theory. And so here's the clue to get some of the traditional approaches to corporate governance and action mixed in. The theories that we tend to work with, and I'm thinking here of agency theory, transaction cost economics, almost all strategic theories, or possible, there were some boutique examples of strategic theories that are a little different. But virtually the theories that we tend to teach at a place like Wharton, straight across the board, they do depend on intrinsic values. You can't have agency theory unless you have the right to property, unless you have the sanctity of promise keeping. Those are two. And probably also the fiduciary relationship, and in accounting, of course, you're quite familiar with this, that relationship of trust. Those are deep value. The problem is a pittance. It's a pitifully small collection of intrinsic values that these theories rest on. They're only max 4 or 5. But we have lots of others. We have the environment. We have non-discrimination. We have respect for people. We have, we may have also obligations to other life forms, to animals other than humans. So, so at any rate, consider this as a practical piece of passive practical reasoning. It's a cost reduction initiative at firm Y. And notice the deep values are going to not only include things like non-discrimination, but they're going to include things like duty to owners. They're going to include things like the obligation I think every firm has to make some contribution to aggregate economic welfare. I mean, that's really why we have corporations. And there are a lot of facts that are going to be relevant. You know, what's the profit? What's the effect on margins? What are the strategic insights, opportunity costs, takeaways from learning from other, all these, and it goes together to create the action. And then now it gets really fancy. I can't even remember if this, yeah, this was in the article. So, and I need to shut up here. So, at any rate, the way this flows is the cost reduction initiative is justified from the ground up. Get the facts straight, the focal value you're aiming for, and then at the top, get the constellation of intrinsic values right. And notice how this puts the lie to it. It demolishes this crazy idea. I don't know how we have come to, we believe it in America with a passion. And that's the shareholder primacy model, that corporations are just about the shareholders. It's nonsense. I mean, it's really stupid. And yet we have bought that for way too many years. Multiple values need to be included in the way we think about corporations. And of course, the problem is how do we get those multiple values up? Well, let's notice that, and I think this is true in Italy, especially, I mean, Ericka and I have talked a little bit about this. You have industry associations, you have a wealth of connections already at an industry level that tend to treat that industry with its own special distinctive capabilities and drawbacks. And on the view that I'm articulating, give up the corporate governance stuff that's written by New York lawyers, because the corporate governance you need has to be fitted to the context, has to be fitted to Italy, has to be fitted to the industry. So let's take, this is not in the thing, but I think it helps illustrate the point. We've got here, semiconductor, Taiwan Semiconductor. Now we got Pfizer, two companies. Now, one thing's for sure, both are going to have obligations to their shareholders, and they're going to have obligations as any firm to make some contribution to the economic welfare of society. Both of them have that. But Pfizer, it may have another. And it may need to be called out, specified, put into corporate governance architecture, in contrast to Taiwan Semiconductor, which may have only those two original. Some industries are organized around intrinsic values. They seem to be obvious choices. The healthcare industry is one. I think banking is another. I think integrity, both at the level of the transaction and also at the level of the integrity of the financial system as a whole, is an intrinsic value that banking needs not to neglect. 2005, Goldman Sachs, my chair is endowed by Goldman Sachs, so I guess I can get away with this. Goldman Sachs, investment banker, this is hypothetical, is going to do a deal with a European pension fund, highly leveraged synthetic derivatives, right? And the banker suspects that the client doesn't know as much as he or she should. And the banker also has been reading a little of the early Bernanke at Princeton, and he knows in 2005 there's some chance of systemic financial risk. And what should she do? What should he do? We have not given that banker any help. What we do, oh, look at Goldman's 13 Commandments. Look at the list that says integrity is one of the things we stand up for, right? We've got an intrinsic value here, integrity. But how in the heck are you supposed to put that together with net present value? Or the system that rewards inside the firm. I mean, the banker has been given a mission impossible. She knows it. And academics know it. And to date, we've been extremely unhelpful in providing answers to the people we put into those situations. And so this is my last slide. How do we determine which industries in Italy, in particular context, need slightly different governance systems, need to arrange themselves in alliances with other members of the industry, or even more broadly? And Italy's already done a lot of that, I think. Well, it takes talk, it takes discussion, and here, I mean, you're familiar with some of this. The, you know, Shear and Palazzo, deriving from Habermas. I mean, I think we can get some help there. So I'll shut up. That's what I wanted to say.
So thank you so much, Ericka. Yeah, you want to add something about this?
Yeah, they start.
Yeah. You need to push the button, I think so. Yeah. Okay.
You want me to?
No, sorry. Thank you for the question.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm happy. There are some slides at the end that I didn't show, so we can take those out, but I'm very happy. Anybody who wants this presentation.
Yeah, sure.
More than welcome. Yeah.
This, okay, maybe now it's on. Okay, I don't know. No, it's very difficult to take the floor after this presentation because every time that I had the opportunity to talk with Tom, it's like, for me, it's really fascinating, if I can say. Sorry. And before, going to what our group has done, I will just spend some words, just have a reaction, if I can, to what Tom said, and please join me. I feel maybe guilty to say this, but this is really my personal feeling. I think that what he said at the beginning is very touched my heart, because he said that at some point we, as Italian scholar, has to move to American journal to explain something that is completely different to what we know. And for us, it was really challenging because it means change the language, change the meaning. As Andrea said before, we have to translate azienda and economia aziendale, which is not translatable with like business administration of firm. And also, as Tom said before, maybe American scholars were not interested to understand about this. So maybe it was really challenging. So I would say another way that we as Italian imported the American model and the American style. I have no reply to this. I think was, but it's my personal viewpoint, I think was like that we were fascinated by this. I remember when I was child, at the end of the 80s, so maybe someone knows better than me, but when I was child, I remember I was living in Verona, and I remember very well the first McDonald's opened in Verona, and it was like the American dream. McDonald's is coming to Italy. And I think we have been really fascinated from this different world, beyond the ocean. And therefore we completely abandon, discourage, decide that our historical background was not sufficient to be international. So we said, okay, we do another job. And I know that each of us did this job, and was very tough, was difficult, because we felt also to be not too much honest to our tradition, because many background comes from an Italian tradition that was based on other words. Like for me, one of the, as Tom said before, I really took many notes and not able to do the same, but when he said if value creation has nothing to do with values, how can be, it's only an exercise of economic optimization. I truly, you know, I truly agree with this, because it's a matter of well-being, it's a matter of people, it's a matter of values instead of value. So sorry for this reaction, but it was something that I want to share with you. And maybe starting from this, I can share what as a GBS subgroup on value and sustainability we did, if you agree. Okay, so I moved there because I have a presentation. Okay, so thank you so much also for his attending online. I'm not very good with the hybrid situation, so let's try to do the best.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, but I forgot to say big thank you to GBS Research Group for this effort, because it's very challenging, no? Because GBS has a long tradition in the continuous research on the social accounting, and GBS is a standard setter that published in 2003 the first standard on social accounting, and in the second version revised in 2013, I remember. And so with this research group, we try to focus on thinking about a new role of value added, new perspective in terms of sustainability value, of multiple value. And so, yes, I think that's necessary to underline these aspects better, because for us it's very challenging, because all start from the results of this group. Yeah, because we have a connection with other research groups, for example, on SMEs and sustainability, and assurance and sustainability. And we want to fix, we want to focus the attention of the consultant, for example, on this topic, and the role of the culture in economy aziendale in business administration. Start from social accounting. Sorry for this. 2 minutes, but it's necessary to introduce your speech.
I think that maybe what we can say that like the final purpose is to understand how we can measure what we are and what we are doing as enterprises. This is like the final step, but we as a research group were more focused on value and sustainability. So this was the idea. Just to say that I'm only representing all the groups, so they asked me to speak, but I'm not to have the speech, but I'm not like the person that did the job, honestly. So like Rossella did a great job with me, Mario Viviani prepared everything, so I'm simply representing them, and of course all the other members of the group. So just to say that I'm not alone, and they simply asked me to do this. So what about the GBS? This is something that it's very difficult to say in front of the president, but we thought that maybe it was easy also to explain a bit of the background. But please, Andrea, join me if I'm not properly explaining. So GBS is a research association which has multiple activities, because it doesn't work as only academic association, but has many interconnection with education, institutions, and so on. So the idea is to be connected with the society. This is the idea. So these are some of the activities they are doing. So research, it means that some of the members of the GBS are also academics. Education, because the idea is to we can say like transform the language from the academic debate to the daily society, because this is something that we have seen, that sometimes as academic we talk in an academic language that is not immediately fruitful for the society, so they try to do that. Then monitoring means constantly have a look at what is going on at international level from the accountant standard setter. So what they are doing, what is doing the EFRA, the ESP, and so on. And again, adapt, in this case, if I can say, to the national context. Because as Andrea said before, Italy, as the majority of the Italian enterprises are small and medium enterprises. And sometimes these standard sector are done for the big corporations, so they are doing a lot for adapting, redefine, and monitoring. Then there is this institutional relationship, like for instance, also today meeting is a mix because the president before said that it's a technical meeting, but also institutional because of the president of the National Chartered Accountant Association. So this is the idea. They are doing network and networking. For instance, I'm joined the GBS as a director of the CSER in Italy, which is another research center which is only based on research. So we do network in this way, another way. And then in terms of dissemination, they have many dissemination activities in terms of conferences, meetings, but also documents that are published to explain to, like Italian standard setter, if I can say, to help organizations. So basically, this is what I say they doing because the president isn't there. So it's like we work together for this. So basically, this is the background. And the GBS decided to create different working group. And we, so Rossella with Mario and myself have been in charge to be responsible for this group on value and sustainability. It is very challenging. It is still very challenging. So the reason behind this started from the idea of value creation, but after your presentation, it's quite difficult to use this word. So I think that we can frame in a different way. And the idea was to understand how we can reconceptualize maybe the corporate business model, so think differently to include more sustainability idea and impact, also find new languages. This is something that we try to do in our group. The focus was basically on three main activities that I will explain also you later. So the first activity was understanding the fundamental of sustainability in today's society. So we spent many time to understand what we mean for sustainability. Then other two steps are more related to the enterprise focus. So have a look at what enterprise are doing today, or firms are doing today. And another focus is more about what institutional standard setters are doing today, and have a look if they talk the same language or not. In terms of methods, we do some literature review, some analysis. We didn't do interview at the moment and still have to develop some business cases. The output that at the beginning they decided to give to us was like a guideline. So the idea was to find new guidelines to understand how to define the value and sustainability. But this was like the original purpose that we had at the beginning. You will see that later on we maybe slightly modified the idea of the final output. So let's see later. So we are working, we started to work last year. So the idea is to conclude this work in autumn this year. So this is basically the starting point. So these are the three purposes that I would like to recap, because I would like to show you later where we are now. So reflect on the fundamentals of sustainability in today's changing environment, and this is where we are right now. Analyze how the regulator and the international standard setter are approaching the issue of value, sustainability, value, and its measurement, and how companies, or better say enterprise in Italy, report on this idea of value or the idea of sustainability. We have discussion in the group because we are still defining a common language, I think. So it's not streamlined as a process. So the basic assumption that we started from was the idea to, like a cultural revolution, or maybe revolution is too much strong, like cultural new approach. So the idea was that we started from the assumption that we need to approach sustainability with a new cultural approach. It's not staying into the neoliberal approach of cost optimization and shareholder value maximization and then add something. This is what we said. We said we have to be paradigmatic, meaning change the paradigm. This was like a basic assumption that we had. For doing this, thanks to Mario Viviani, he suggests to divide the group in three small groups. So the first one, we divided, the first one was more focused on the historical, anthropological, sociological, and also macroeconomics focus. and I was leading this group. For me, we decided to be out of the comfort zone because I am an accountant. So for me, talking with people that historical anthropology was really challenging, but we decided on purpose to be out of the comfort zone because otherwise it's difficult to be paradigmatic. So, and then the second group was led by Mario, and they focus more on enterprise, so value, sustainability, and enterprise. And then the third one was led by Rossella, and they focus more on business economics, value, sustainability, and measurement. This was exactly their idea. So the expected outcome that we decided after this process is no longer like guidelines or standard setter, but we decided to propose a critical, interpretative, non-academic piece of writing. I don't know what does it mean exactly, but this is more or less, so non-academic, critical, interpretative.
The keyword is critical.
Critical is the keyword, okay? Critical, interpretative, non-academic piece of writing. This is more or less. So it means some pages written, but we want to be like, we think about position paper or manifesto or something more also political oriented. So something that is streamlined not to the journals of the academic research, but the community, the society, if I can say, the government. So this is our idea. We also decided that this piece of writing or paper should be short, focused, and maybe open to different, maybe added and attachment later on. So this was it. Okay. To be as much paradigmatic as possible, we decided that the group composition was mixed. So we have scholars from the academia. I tried to list all of them there, so I thank all of them. And managers also from the enterprises, and also practitioners. So people who are working with the enterprise, because this was also the focus that we had. And the mission that we decided was to have a look at sustainability from different viewpoints. So sustainability not as an economic value, not as a moral value, but differently. This was the tough part, to be out of our comfort zone. The themes that we tried to address was about if sustainability is a value, so could we consider sustainability as a value per se? And if sustainability has a value inside, has an intrinsic value inside. And also if this idea of sustainability produces some values, some other values. So these are the three key points that we tried to address. And the focus that we tried to keep was the enterprise. So every meeting, we tried to put ourselves into the enterprise domain. So the idea was the viewpoint was really practical, not only conceptual. So in February, we defined the specific purposes, and we tried to provide some reply in May, but this is still a work in progress, so we are still there. One of the purposes was, is that possible to redefine, reconfigure the so-called business model? Is that possible to think differently? I like very much your point on corporate governance, Tom, because it's another word that we imported. We also say corporate governance, but maybe in Italian we didn't have a corporate governance, a specific idea before that they explained to us. So it's the same with business model. Can we think differently? Can we think another way to business model? The other idea was to create a dialogue between the regulation, what the all the normative framework, the European normative framework is obliging enterprise to do with what enterprise are currently doing. We have observed that there is a gap, and also from the research that we did as a researcher, we have seen that this gap cannot be filled with a top-down approach. It's very difficult because if you want to move to a different way to conceptualize the role of businesses, it's not possible to do that with a law that comply you to do something. This is what it says. So reconciling regulation with the behavior means, can we find a way to improve the cultural approach of the enterprises and not simply adapt to a regulatory framework? So this was another big challenge. Another purpose was increase the value of the enterprise, but value, not only economic value, because as you said before, what we have seen from enterprises that they create value in many different ways. And as also we discussed when we met in Trento, there are examples of today organizations that decide to share the dividends with the employees. This is completely different from the model that we are familiar to learn and to understand. So is there a way to increase not only the value in terms of economic value, but increase the way in which we conceptualize the value of the enterprise? And then, for me, this is the most important, but this is my viewpoint. So steer the regulator toward less rigid and indifferentiated norms, considering the process more important over the pure compliance. So this is a big point, means enterprises do not want to have a compliance, like a tick boxing approach. Tick boxing means, okay, I feel what the regulator asks, but this is not what we are promoting as a group. The idea is that the process, and these were the role of accountant and professional accountant in there, the process that that organization and enterprises can do to measure in a different way their value as a value itself. That's the point. The process as a value in itself. But no one in the regulatory framework is talking about process. They are talking about filling boxes. And for us, this is really meaningless. So these are three specific questions that we try to address, and then some initial thoughts. So we asked to ourselves, if sustainability is a value, what kind of value it is, and to what extent could be considered a value. It is an intrinsic value, a focal value, it is a value itself or not. Could we learn something different in terms of value, starting from the enterprises? So the idea is, could we have more, in academic world, I would say like grounded theory approach. So could we, because before you mentioned the two doors, so the quantitative and the qualitative. In the pure, I'm a qualitative researcher, sorry for this, but in the pure qualitative, there is also the grounded theory approach, means observe what is going on and theorize. So could we define this value of sustainability starting from the enterprise's experience? Is there a way to find a new way to theorize this value? So this was a question. Then the other one is, does sustainability create a value in itself? So be sustainable, be paradigmatic in the company or organization or enterprise behavior, create a value, the value that we defined before. So is this for whom is this value? And the idea is to explore the conceptual, process, and linguistic gap, again, starting from the enterprise's viewpoint. And the last question was about the which kind of systems can we use to best serve the need of measuring this value? And this is a big question still there, because as the president said before, Andrea, the GBS in Italy is recognized, also internationally recognized, because you know that in German they use a lot of our added value statement, of your added value statement. So the GBS is recognized because they try to use this added value statement that define a first step of value creation and a second step of value distribution among different stakeholders. So starting from this experience, the third question is asking if, is there a way to make a step forward from this measuring model or not? We are still working on this. So we have some preliminary thoughts here, and I will thank Mario that give me like the summary of this thought. So I try to translate, Mario, because it's not, sometimes you know that the Italian understanding is not the same in English, so I try to do my best, but please, if something is not clear, jump into the discussion with no issue, no problem. So the first one is the idea of sustainability for the enterprise or sustainability behavior of the enterprise. So it means that sustainability is something that contributes to the benefit, contribute or benefit the collective and individual well-being. So for us, well-being means that the focus is on people who are working, who are acting into the organization. And the collective action of these people can increase the individual well-being. I mean, each one is staying better, but also a collective well-being. The society is better, which is slightly different, I think, or maybe importantly different from the idea of wealth creation. It's a different idea, because well-being is more focused on people, as said before also Andrea. Wealth creation is more focused on the GDP, if I can say. So it's slightly different, but please also, Paolo, join the discussion if it's not correct. And then we also say that sustainability could be considered a focal intrinsic value. So this is something that we define. Sustainability is focal value because it's functional to the benefit of collective and individual well-being, again. Then we also say that this kind of value, this intrinsic value and focal value, should be socially recognized, could be exchangeable, and maybe incrementable. So is a value that could be exchangeable, is a value that could be socially recognized. Could sustainability increase? There's like level of values, something that is there. And the other two touch the idea of reputation and accountability. We have to be, reputation sometimes touch the idea of legitimacy, so we have to be clear on this, but we say that sustainability, because sustainability should contribute to the collective and individual well-being, should be a socially shared and recognized value. And therefore, we said maybe is the object of the exchange in a possible market in the society. So maybe we can share the idea of sustainability as a new value for maybe also the legitimization of the enterprise. This is debatable because it's, again, for me, it's a matter of motivation again, and we can go more legitimacy theory, one of the theory, but we can be also more Aristotelian and say because it's right to do that, but it's another like philosophical matter that I'm not an expert. And the other one is about how we can communicate and disseminate this value. I try to use the word accountability in this matter because for me make more sense. So it's not possible to predetermine what well-being is, but we can try to define and communicate, and therefore maybe the enterprise can exchange this experience, exchange this process, exchange this value in society. So basically this is the first part of the process. As you can see, coming back to our three purposes, I added one. So we reflect on the fundamental of sustainability. We are still there. What the GBS is still waiting for us as a group is the analysis of the international standard set, but it's something that we can do. But before doing that, we have to be agree on what is sustainability. We still have to do the analysis from the experience of the enterprise, and then we have to decide how to write up this manifesto or position paper. And then I put like autumn leaf there because the idea is that we try to finish this in late autumn, maybe winter time or before winter time. So yeah, basically this is where we are now. And it's only, I mean, it's a working process. So we want only to share with all of you what we have done. Yeah, the idea was to share ideas, exchange of impressions, and because it was challenging for us to question about if sustainability is a value, which kind of value is a value that could be distributed and so on. So basic question that we try to address. So thank you, and thank you to my colleagues that prepared this.
Yeah, the first part of the thinking that want to underline the role of Professor Paolo Ricci. Is our past president of GBS, and so it's focused on in this period, Paolo, about on the role of value creation process in non-profit organization and another kind of organization. So it's difficult, and you won't take the right time to thinking and to find this kind of language, like such as I would say a glossary approach. Yeah, because if you want to say something in a simple way for consultants, and we feel this challenge inside in our heart, I think that we need to be effective, no? And so you want set not guidelines, but a tool to improve a reflection about the roles of the values, just to approach the value creation. Yeah, try, but it's very important to try a connection with what now happens about the measurements, about the regulation in a European Commission, for example, because now we have the great challenge that is the CSRD, Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, and Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive, two directives very challenging. So this is the context. This is the context. And we have the small medium enterprises, and we think that if you try, if you're thinking about the high topics, you need to share. You need to understand that in a big corporation you don't have the same things. For example, in Italy we have the role of the district, no, in the network, not formalized, but in which the role of the values is very relevant. So yeah, just to say something, examples of what in which context we work and we play. So
On Mount Olympus of intrinsic values, sustainability is one. I think people look for lists of intrinsic values, and some researchers, Milton Rokesh, there are many social psychologists who have done studies that show that there's an enormous overlapping consensus even among very different cultures about some fundamental things, such as human beings deserve respect just because they're human beings, truth-telling, and others. But I think it's important not to get caught up in the list, because each company, each industry, each business environment, community, including nation states like Italy, needs to be creating those in their own language, in their own context, and typically they probably over time need a little adjusting. So, but yes, I think of sustainability in a broad sense, but more important is, I think, for you to define it. I think it will end up being, unless it's just a very simple term that means financial ability over the long term to not fall apart or something like that, but which I think you have a much richer version of mine. It's going to count as an intrinsic value, but the most important thing is the process by which you define that notion of sustainability. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. So do you think that, because if I understood, you said, okay, there are maybe someone who is looking for list of values, and sustainability could be one in this value, but they are not. It's not a matter of translation. You said so. Sustainability in Italy have a specific meaning compared to sustainability in the US. Is that correct? I understood correctly.
Yes. Yes, I think.
So maybe this is something that we can contribute.
Yes, yes. I mean, every, let's see how to put it. Take something very simple like the golden rule. Okay? Confucius defines it in a negative version using Chinese characters that put everything absolutely in the present. But it still has a grounding that is similar to the Christian golden rule, which we find expressed in the Gospels, similar to the German philosopher Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative. You know, I ought only act such that I can at the same time. Will my maxim become a universal law of nature? It's very complex, very Germanic, and so on. But the most important thing is that it get defined for the purpose of action. And I have a sense that there's an opportunity in Italy to do that. And I don't know how you define it. One of the questions that I would ask everyone here is, what are some things that are done in Italy or have been done in Italy historically that the rest of the world could learn from? That you think you can take some pride in. And because there stands a uniqueness that perhaps deserves special attention.
The problem is that the value is, in your opinion, but I spoke for my opinion, is value is well-being. Well-being. Okay, it's benessere for in my opinion. And the other values are meta values for the condition of firm society, a community. But this is very important for scholars and for study about value. The definition of value as benessere, as well-being. But in other conditions, historical condition, economic condition, it's possible that this concept change. But it's possible that the idea of well-being is different for person in the community in approach of the problem of your existence of community. This is the question. Value or values? Economic value or social value? In my opinion, it's not a question. The value is only one. This is the problem and that origin of this studies about the question of fair and relationship, fair and market and community, community and society. When I think that the question is the relationship between creation, creating value, and distribution of value, is a false condition, it's a false idea. The idea is the origin of the problem. What's the value? Value is benessere, is well-being for individual, for person, and the community. Other values are meta values, meta concept, okay, that we use to define the question. This is my opinion. Your opinion is important for me.
I mean, what happens is
Sorry for my English.
I think if I understood you correctly, I agree completely. But you might agree too, we turn that relationship upside down on its head sometimes. So we say it's very important to treat your employees well because we will make more money. When I was at the festival in Trento, I cited a case that just happened a couple of weeks ago in Europe. Apparently, Amundi and one other of the big asset managers applied pressure to McDonald's for their use of excessive use of antibiotics. So the excessive use of antibiotics, I don't have to tell you, create antimicrobial resistance. And this is a tragic and evolving situation. And good for Amundi and the others to put pressure. Do you know, however, the way in which they described why they did it? Why were they supporting the shareholder proposal that would, they said, because it poses a financial risk to shareholders of McDonald's. A financial risk to shareholders of McDonald's. Excuse me, it poses a risk to the lives of people who will die if the antibiotics don't work.
It explains. Yeah.
Congrats for your presentation. It's in particular the 2 doors firstly, and then the 3 doors.
The third door.
My or semantic locution, just we have many elements and key elements to organize or reorganize. But it's very interesting try to conceptualize your path, your logical path. In my idea, to offer the same perspective in under another dimension, under another variable or parameter, the time. The time is absent. The time. Because starting from the GRI, or the first word of international standard, in the first definition, we have a precise, clear, not unclear locution, semantic locution, that is short, medium, and long term. We do not analyze in the different reflection the value creation or the value distribution in the short term or under the short term, as for example listed companies, okay, or the medium term, or for example for the NGO, the long term. And so we're paying in an Aristotelian view of the happiness, that is the value of the meta value. So could be try to reorganize these 2 doors, the 3 doors, under the short terms or the medium terms, but the time under a Greek gate. A Greek gate or a big gate where it's possible to entrance through the three doors, an entrance of the time. Why? Because the value that we produce, the firm produce, the NGO, the public sector produce, the public organization, the entity, the local municipality produce, is produced now. But it's not the same value that produce, for example, thinking through financial reporting, non-financial reporting, financial reporting consolidating in infrannual, during the exercise or financial exercise, for example. But if we do not capture the just time where the value is created, we produce an infringement of conceptualization, or an infringement to capture a value dimension that it's the dimension of what? So also because the accountant, I am an accountant, we discuss, study, analyze, observe many things on the value and values. And I agree with Professor Ricci that are two different perspectives. So values concur to determine the value. Okay, this is my opinion that I'm absolutely agree. But the perspective that, in my opinion, is failing in the study, and where the scholar paid no attention or paid little attention, is the time and the catch rate of the value creation in short, in the term, in the medium time, and the relationship producing for the different timeline in stakeholder pressures. So also the relation with the stakeholder engagement is different in different timeline. If we choose a different time where the value is created or is destroyed, so could be a conventional approach, but as accountant, as scholar, but as practitioner too, just to finish, as practitioner too, we study the value of intrinsic values, analyze value created or destroyed and the intrinsic values of the focalic values, but we try to conceptualize, try to visualize, but we really do not measure the value created. We are not able to capture the real value created because we do not consider the unique important variable that is the time, the short time, the medium time, long time. So the short term is for listed company, for example, for the information to the stakeholder, for the investor, for the financial relators.
I mean, I agree.
But it's only
no, I agree wholeheartedly, and I did not speak of it.
Thanks to your presentation.
You are more eloquent than I could be on the topic. The measurement mechanisms are woefully inadequate when it comes. We tend to do short term, we tend to do medium term. No doubt the audit done at Silicon Valley Bank by KPMG was short term, very profitable.
For the water, you know, for the water for the company.
But it's not good for KPMG in the long term. And I recall I had an opportunity at the Aspen Institute. We brought, I was working on a project that the Aspen had called The Purpose of the Corporation. We brought some very high-powered American CEOs in. And as we tried to push them, and the wisdom really that they started just inching towards was, we need some measurement systems that bring us more to the long term. As early as 1989, Preston and Sapienza's work showed that the three major classes of stakeholders, employees, customers, and shareholders, are not involved in a zero-sum game. They tend to rise or fall together. unethical behavior in general is weeded out almost completely in the long term. But, and here's, I think you will agree with this. So I'm going back to the United States, and I have bought some perfume for my spouse. And when I handed to her, I bought it here wrong. When I hand it to her, I'm going to say, dear, I want you to know that the main reason, as I was thinking through this, was I just realized that in the long term, I am going to be a lot better off if I give you this perfume, because otherwise you might not feed me as well. You might not, laugh at my jokes as much, and so on and so forth. No, that's not the reason that I am honoring my spouse with a gift. I am honoring my spouse with a gift because she is a wonderful person and deserves it. And the same, I call it the grand temptation. The convergence, long-term convergence with we get the time horizon right, is really powerful. And our measurement systems are absolutely right, are horrible. But there are some instances in which, even in the long term, bad things will happen if we do bad things to other values if we do what we should do. I'll give you one example. Merck has done some horrible things, a pharmaceutical company recently, but one of the things they did a long time ago, which was amazing, was they had an opportunity to create a drug, ivermectin, which treated river blindness, a disease that afflicted poor people who lived in the river basins around the world. People so poor they could not afford to pay for the drug. But Merck happened to be the holder of a particular patent on an animal drug that they were pretty sure that after 10 years of money and research, about $500 million, they could apply, and they did it. And that disease is almost eradicated today. This is a disease where the worms travel into your eyes. I mean, it's absolutely awful. And when the chairman of Merck at the time came to my class, one of my students asked him, Mr. Vagelos, that was his name, what did you tell the board of directors? He said, I didn't tell the board of directors. But there lies the problem, right? They anticipated losing not a lot of money, but losing some money, but to satisfy this huge value, right, that they had an opportunity to do. And so we need work on two fronts: to stretch that timeline, but also create a way of thinking about what we do in the corporation so we don't have to make excuses for doing the right thing.
And if I go back 1 second to the question that you also put to all of us before, please let me know if you agree. But you asked what could be like exported from Italy to outside as a learning. Yeah. If I, coming back with my memory to all the Italian scholars and contribution, maybe I select only one small piece of thought, which comes from Onida, which is a colleague of Zappa. And I think that maybe I'm wrong, Professor Ricci, please apologize. But I think that the small thing could be that the purpose of an enterprise is to satisfy human needs. Yeah. And human needs are very variegated, because Onida said they are
complex,
they are political, social, religious, so there's a health, so many different needs.
Yeah.
So, exactly. So for me, this is like the key point, because if we stick on this key point, so the purpose is to satisfy human needs, and the economic mechanism of techniques is at the service of this satisfaction.
An umbrella.
For me, this is the very. Yeah, this is another key question. Is it an intrinsic value to satisfy human needs?
Oh, absolutely. Yes,
maybe we discussed the pyramid needs of Maslow. I think so. Maybe we actually is in continuous involvement. So
yeah, I mean,
Sorry if I say that. In my opinion, this way, the profit isn't a value. The profit isn't a value. In this direction, in my opinion, this is a historical condition for a firm, for a market to live. Okay, it's a meta value to a new condition. This is the difference between moral position, an ethical position. Morality and ethics, it's not the same thing. Okay, morality is the present condition of a society, of a fair, okay, morality. But ethics is a new perspective, is the courage to a new idea of life, of fair, of market, of community. This is a very important question. In this direction, the profit is not a value. It's a condition, historical, important condition, but not is a value. It's a condition to. It's a condition necessary for, but not a value. In fact, it's possible to measure the profit, but it's very difficult to measure the exit of a profit, the last condition of a process.
yes, I mean, I talk about it as a non-intrinsic value. Profit is a value, and properly can stand as a focal intention for a firm in a variety of ways. Serve, which is a higher value, and I mean, here we are in Rome, which is the traditional locus of the Catholic Church, and I'm not Catholic, but I mean, even Catholic social teaching puts the common good at the end of the chain of reasoning, and so we've known this for a long time. Why do we forget it after we go to business school? It's almost as if we train it out of the people that we sometimes send to business school. But I wanted to ask Ericka, you've done some studies. I've had a chance to read just a little bit of what you've done on the distinctiveness of the Italian approach. What are some things you think Italy gets right that others don't get quite so right?
I'm not the only one, because also Professor Ricci wrote a lot, also Professor Venturelli, so I'm not the only one that tried to say, but I think that what is completely different from the Italian background is that I perceive a really self-interest approach in the neoclassical school of thinking, and I perceive a collective way of thinking in the Italian approach. Also, what we discuss about sustainability is that sustainability in an active practice and process is not something that you can do alone. And if I think about profit maximization in the shareholder value creation, it's really self-interested to specific individual people. And as you said before, you have to put all the value into risk measurement to move some behaviors. For me, this is crazy, if I can say, because when we talk about people, we talk about health, we talk about mental health, we talk about relationship, we talk about dignity, and this is something that it is not only self-interest, it's collective. Yes. I think this is like a big difference that I see from what I learn and what I study, but as a scholar, I continue to have to study new things. So for me, this is a completely different viewpoint. Also, if I compare, because I come from this background, in Italy, we had many cooperatives. Also, I am a member in a center in Canada. They also have like the Center for Accounting and Reporting for Cooperatives. but the way in which these two forms of cooperatives work are different. They are, because the cooperatives in Canada are like the enterprises. They measure the economic value, so they are like enterprise but cooperative. In Italy, it's completely different because cooperative is, I think, is the most important collective action that we have to see that we can serve all together a higher purpose, which is not self-interested. This is what I see.
Same voice.
Yeah.
In corporate governance too.
I think that the big difference is collective versus individual. And for me, this is a different way to think about society. If I can just go back to what you said before about health. I remember, I just bring to you my personal experience. I remember a colleague from the MIT that came to Trento some years ago and asked me, I know that you have 3 kids. And I said, yes. And so his reaction was very expensive. And immediately I think, yes, it is, because of course it means that you have to give food to 3 people. But he said, no, at the delivery, at the hospital. And I said, I didn't pay nothing. He was astonished because he said, how? Why didn't you pay? I didn't pay nothing. If you go to the hospital, you didn't pay in Italy because we have a collective national health system. And for me, this is like the big difference. For me, this is the big difference.
Yes, we have not done that well in the United States. I was speaking to, this is a few years back, but I was speaking to the heads of the boards of directors of a series of hospitals in San Francisco. And I asked them, how many of you think there is a right to health care that should be basically managed and made sure that it is implemented by the government? And virtually every one of these people raised their hands. And yet most of them were working for for-profit hospitals. I was with a group of PBM executives. It's a pharmacy benefit manager. And in the United States, they're very large. They make billions. And I was with a group of their top 200 executives. And I asked them, how many of you think there's a right to health care, a human right to health care? And every hand in the room raised. But later, we were in the corridor, out of the meeting, and a couple of the more senior executives and I were talking. I said, I don't understand this. I said, everybody raised their hand in the room, and yet at this very moment, as we speak, in Washington, you have hired lobbyists that are lobbying to push against the expansion of health care. And I mean, these are not bad people, and what I found was they are genuinely confused. They don't know what to do. They can't get these two parts of their brain together. And I think of a lot of the problem comes from people like me in business schools and theorists who teach a way of keeping these things separate that really belong together. So Italy has already experience and I know nothing, but experience with industry-wide cooperation and cooperation with government organizations that you don't find in a place like Canada or the United States. Is that
I think so.
fair to say?
Maybe you can have, I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Because cooperation, we have 2 forms of cooperation in Italy, one in the center of Italy, one more in the north. I'm more familiar with the one in the north, and comes from the poverty. Honestly, it comes from poverty because no one had nothing, so they decided to put their effort together for the collective well-being. Again, back to this point. So the cooperation there was born because, as you've seen, Trento is like, I know very well this part. Like Trento is like a city in the valley. So in the valley, nothing was there. There was nothing in the valley. So people were really like suffering from like they're not able to feed in, so to have food, to access to food and nothing. So they decide to put everything together, all their effort together, and they create a cooperative. It's the same that Mohammed Yunus is doing in Bangladesh for the Grameen Danone. When I've seen the Grameen Danone experience, I said, okay, this is a direct cooperative like in our Italian regions. It's saying the same, nothing different.
But it's, I mean, to make your point, and the point that's been made by a number of people here, a lot of that has to do, how to do it well and poorly is, it's context specific, it's culture specific. So we have, the wonderful example of micro lending and Nobel Prize winners, but I don't know if you know about SKS. SKS basically took a American style IPO on the Mumbai stock market. It was the largest, I think it was the second largest IPO in Mumbai history. And they did an IPO for micro lending. And it's a for-profit firm, but it's dedicated to helping. It has struggled. It has been pretty much a complete failure in contrast to the Bangladeshi successes. And that's because, and the people who found it and failed will tell you, you can listen to some of the tapes. They said, we couldn't get these two parts of ourselves together. On the one hand, we were behaving as if we got a return for the shareholders. And then on the other hand, we were supposed to be helping poor people, often who had 4 or 5 loans that they were trying to juggle. And so we were optimizing over there. And we lost the trust of the people and of the government, and it didn't work. So, experience doing that kind of thing is, I think, really important.
So, question. If I understand all the passage correctly of your argument before, and I have a question, a curiosity, then I think can have some implication also for our job, and is this: it's possible to use not intrinsic value to promote the achieving of intrinsic value. I mean, this is because I was thinking what Ericka Costa told about the importance focusing on the process. And in a very practice way, we have got government law scenario in this moment. There are having an approach that we don't share very much of ticking box of very compliance normative. And we know there are some pieces that are not aligned with ethical value, also in supporting, not supporting in this scenario, small and medium enterprise that need our job much more than the big one. But maybe supporting at government level, it's one of the activity of National Council of Accountants that is hosting this meeting. We have in connection with government, so maybe help them to structuring the law scenario, the normative framework. Also, with if we don't share at 100% that objective, maybe we can achieve externality, negative externality reduction, so an intrinsic value. So, I mean, it should be correct to act in this way, or in your framework, not sharing all the ethical passages of the process should stop us at a certain point. I don't know if.
Yeah, well, I think, I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're saying. I understand it.
Yeah, it's fine.
This?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Am I okay? Yeah.
On the contrary, yes, red line sometimes
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure I understood fully, but if I understand what you're saying, I agree completely. The experience I think you've already had in Italy suggests that that delicate intersection of regulators and the government with some of the sort of constitutional governance industry stuff we're talking about needs to be managed properly. You can build on past successes and experience to do it. But if you look at the United States, for example, we have mucked it up dramatically. So there are certain issues where intrinsic values are at stake, where industry cooperation is essential, but where the government has to help, sometimes by getting out, but sometimes by regulating in the right way. I will give you an example. The environmental need to have undepleted fish stocks. In other words, the extinction of certain fish species, as you probably know, is proceeding rapidly. It's a global oceanic tragedy. And so in the United States, the fishing industry in a certain part of New England organized and agreed to set limits, and everybody agreed in this group, it was a business group, to set limits on how many of a particular fish species they would catch, except for one outlier. It was a rather small fishing firm, and it said no, and it took the case to the US government, and the US government said, this is in restraint of trade. In other words, that neoclassical notion of the perfectly free market and independent actors all competing in a way that benefits, supposed to send us to heaven, I guess, in the end. It just doesn't work. They agreed that it was antitrust, and that species of fish is no longer in existence. It was fished out because the industry wasn't, the government didn't cooperate in a way that allowed it to be effective.
That was great.
So with our group, we try to support the small enterprise, the small Italian enterprise, to discover their values. This is the solution, probably.
Yes, and you're talking about it as a process of discovery, which I noticed was one of the things that
also in order to
yeah.
eliminate, to reduce the greenwashing in reporting.
Yeah, because in this moment we have a lot of framework, a lot of standard, and a lot of different lobby and pressure in which the definition of value is different. So it's not easy to focus your attention on the right. Yeah, but it's difficult to find the right definition. But if you draw a path, maybe you can find the reply for different organizations. So.
To follow up on that, and I'm completely ignorant, so I'm just asking a question. Does the accounting industry maybe have in Italy an entree, a window of access that some of the other groups, even activist groups, might not have because their access is through the public relations and marketing aspect? I don't know. I mean, I'm just asking this question. Is accounting
Who is the president now? Who is the president? De Nuccio?
I mean, greenwashing is a huge issue.
Very wide.
Yeah.
Yeah, because now you have a phenomenon like isomorphism, for example, between companies. No, a lot of small medium enterprise try to mine the big company in terms of sustainability.
Yes.
Yeah, the same behaviors, the same practice, not behaviors, the same practice, for example, in terms of
Same measurement.
ESG reporting, same measurement, and so it's a risk. It's a risk, and sometimes depends by the sector a lot in Italy. Yeah, I saw these different yes, behaviors in management, for example.
The risk for small enterprises in Italy is to approach for the first time to these issues in a compliant way.
Yes, they want immediately the solution. Yeah, and it's you know that it's a complex path made by critical steps. You need time. Because you have organizational change. You have something, a lot of connection with what you are doing. So that was great. The time, yeah, we took a lot of time. Yes, we have lunch, but I want to know if you have more questions or suggestions or I don't know. Yeah. Thanks. Laura is our president of the scientific commission in GBS. So.
Yes. In this case, I'm only Lara Tarquinio. And I want to say something that I think that you don't agree. I like too much your consideration and also my colleagues. But my opinion is, and in this case, I'm talking about what I think. I'm an accountant. Generally, I wear eyeglasses of an accountant. And in this case, I think that profit is one of the most important value for a company. In general, for companies, when we speak about, for example, non-governmental organization, non-profit organization, we can talk of other fundamental values. But when we speak about companies, for example, an enterprise or a firm that has to work on the market to produce, to obtain profit. In this case, I think that the most important value for a company is profit. And this is an aspect that we can link to sustainability. So I think that sustainability is an important question, but the base of sustainability is corporate social responsibility. And when we talk about corporate social responsibility, I think that the first important responsibility for a company is to be profitable, then to obey the law, then to be ethical. And I can link my consideration with those one of my colleague Paolo that say he talked about time. I think that in the long period it's possible to share the activity to be profitable and also ethical. I think that it is possible to have all together these two aspects. The only question is, in my opinion, is that we have to form people, in this case, universities, NGO, and other companies can do it. So produce people that know very well what is ethic and what is ethical or non-ethical in a company, or also in the relationship between people. Because in our consideration, I think that the only thing that we don't say is the importance of profit, and is a value. Oh, I know that is an economic value, but I am an accountant, so I'm not a philosopher. I'm not a person that will work on sociology or not, and so on. So I want to defend, if it's possible, the profit as value.
Sorry, but in my opinion, the profit is not the target of the value. Okay. It's only this is a confusion between means and ends in corporation and the public sector.
Yeah, and I think that, but I mean, I think that the value, the point you're adding here is that profit is really important, and to put yourself in a position where you're condemning profit puts you in a position where you're condemning the achievement of some of these other values you want to achieve. It needs to be measured. It needs to be understood properly. It's the engines that work to profit need to be understood. One of my favorite quotations is from the management theorist Peter Drucker. I don't know if you've heard of it, but he once said, even if archangels inhabited corporate boardrooms instead of mere mortals, they would have to be concerned about profits. And so I take your point, and I think these corporations, I mean, they're taller and richer than most of us, but they have exceedingly narrow personalities. They don't cry at funerals. They don't have emotions, as far as I can tell. Why do we have them? We have them because of their economic capacity, primarily. So I want to say. So,
la rischio di impresa e del profitto inteso come mezzo per la sopravvivenza dell'impresa.
So, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this inspiring discussion, as you can see. And yeah, we have maybe not enough time to to resolve this question, but I think that yeah. So today, after because we have a meeting for GBS for evaluate the upgrade in scientific group and in our home. And so now we have 50 minutes or 50 minutes. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Non è che voleva fare una domanda?
No, okay, no problem. Yes.
No, facciamo vedere.
I don't, sorry, I don't want to disturb the prosecution of the conference. I would like just to continue the question posed by the colleague about the fact that just because we are accountants, I think that we should enlarge our vision. So also providing new insights to business about the merge of the profit orientation to other orientation. Just because we are accountants, we have in Italy long roots about the civic and civil tradition. And as an accountant, I feel responsible to contribute to this change. Just this. Okay. Thank you.